Hello, Alabama friends. The injuries currently affecting the Alabama team, could they affect this team in a terrible way? It depends. Let's analyze this surprising news and other news about the team. Subscribe to the channel to receive more news. Kalen DeBoer's recent update on the injuries to Kendrick Law and Devonta Smith provides important insight for Alabama fans, especially as the game against Vanderbilt approaches. During the SEC conference call, DeBoer was clear that Law, one of the Crimson Tide's most important wide receivers, is still recovering from a lower body injury but has not been ruled out for Saturday's game. That kind of information always gets fans on edge, especially considering Law's importance to the offensive scheme, even without being the primary receiver. His blocking skills and constant presence on the field are valuable to the structure of Alabama's offense. Law's injury, suffered during the win over Georgia, came at a crucial time in the season. DeBoer mentioned that Law was having a good week of practice and was showing great enthusiasm leading up to the game, which only heightens the frustration over his early exit. Even though he hasn't racked up big catches so far, with just 2 catches for 41 yards and a touchdown, his contribution to the offense goes beyond the stats. This is something that often goes unnoticed by those who only look at the scorecards, but it's something that DeBoer and his coaching staff value extremely highly, especially when it comes to helping block and run plays that open up the offense's other talents. Devonta Smith's situation, on the other hand, seems less of a concern. Smith was seen leaving the field a few times during the matchup with the Bulldogs, but according to DeBoer, he was just dealing with cramps. The good news for Alabama is that Smith was able to practice all week, which indicates that he'll be ready to face Vanderbilt. However, taking care of the player's physical condition remains a priority for the coaching staff, as this season has been marked by intense physical challenges. As Alabama prepares for another important conference game, the health of key players will be crucial. The SEC availability report, which will be released closer to the game, will be a key factor in understanding Law's situation. Regardless, with or without Law on the field, the Crimson Tide know it will take a collective effort to maintain the level of performance that fans have come to expect and that Kalen DeBoer has dedicatedly cultivated. Once again, the spirit of overcoming obstacles and meticulous preparation that defines Alabama will be put to the test, but the confidence in DeBoer's leadership and the talent of the roster remains unshaken. The 2024 Heisman race is far from over, and anyone who thinks Alabama quarterback Jalen Milroe is already locked in for the award needs to think again. While Milroe has shown impressive performances in the early weeks, especially in the win over Georgia, he still has a long way to go. With his BetMGM odds dropping to plus 200 after a 4-touchdown performance, 2 throwing and 2 rushing, Milroe continues to prove himself to be a vital piece to the Crimson Tide's success. His 75-yard pass to Ryan Williams was the highlight of a game where he demonstrated not only arm skill, but also the ability to use his legs to set the pace of the game. Milroe has already accumulated 18 touchdowns in just 4 games, which puts him in a very competitive position. Compared to other quarterbacks, such as Miami's Cam Ward, who has similar numbers but has played 1 more game, Milroe has maintained remarkable efficiency. His 73% completion rate and 11-plus yards per attempt are stats few players can match, and if he keeps up this pace, the Heisman becomes a real possibility. However, as everyone knows, the path to the Heisman is unpredictable, and Milroe will have to remain consistent in each of Alabama's remaining games. The Alabama-Georgia matchup was a great platform for Milroe to make a name for himself, and his position as the favorite makes sense, especially with the dominant performance he had against one of college football's biggest powers. However, it's wise not to put all your eggs in his basket too soon. While he's at the top of the odds, other players have also shown themselves to be worthy of consideration, and the fact that we're only a third of the way through the season leaves plenty of room for surprises. DeBoer himself knows that maintaining that consistency is the real challenge for Milroe, especially on a schedule that still has Vanderbilt, LSU, and Auburn on the way. An intriguing example of another Heisman candidate is Boise State running back Ashton Jeanty, who has some crazy stats so far. With 845 yards and 13 touchdowns in 4 games, he's making waves even though he doesn't play in a conference as powerful as the SEC. Shandy rushed for 259 yards and 4 touchdowns against Washington State in Week 5, proving that when he touches the ball, big plays happen. The biggest obstacle for Shandy is the lack of exposure in major conferences, but if he continues to average 15.3 yards per carry in the fourth quarter, his name will inevitably be considered. Other players to watch include Clemson's Cade Klubnik and Georgia's Carson Beck, both quarterbacks who have been keeping their team's hopes alive. Klubnik, after a slow start, has now thrown for 16 touchdowns in 5 games, while Beck, despite his recent dip in form, still has a lot of potential. Not to mention Ohio State wide receiver Jeremiah Smith, who, despite being a freshman, has already impressed with 364 yards and 5 touchdowns in 4 games. The Heisman race, therefore, remains wide open, and Milroe is certainly in the spotlight. However, history shows that consistency and the ability to step up in the big time will be the determining factors. The Crimson Tide, under DeBoer, have all the tools to support their quarterback in that quest, and if Milroe continues to show the improvement we've seen so far, he'll have a real chance to become another Heisman to emerge from Tuscaloosa. Domani Jackson's consistency has stood out in an Alabama secondary that entered the season with some significant question marks. The USC transfer arrived with high expectations and has so far lived up to them, filling a critical void in the Crimson Tide defense. His performance in the win over Georgia, especially with the crucial first-quarter interception, was a highlight that helped shape the course of the game. By perfectly reading Carson Beck's play, Jackson put Alabama in an advantageous position on the scoreboard, demonstrating his ability to be in the right place at the right time. Coming to Tuscaloosa, Jackson faced the challenge of replacing key players like Kool-Aid McKinstry and Terrion Arnold, both now in the NFL. Additionally, with other big names leaving for the transfer portal, Alabama entered the season without a cornerback with significant SEC experience. That put more pressure on Jackson, who had never played in college football's most competitive conference. Still, he embraced this leadership role and quickly made his presence felt on the field, albeit in a quiet way. In the first few games, Jackson didn't show up in the stats in a big way, but that was a reflection of his defensive solidity. Opposing quarterbacks avoided throwing his way, and when they did, he limited the plays to minimal gains. His record of allowing just 7 yards in coverage in the first 3 games is a clear indication of his ability to isolate opponents and execute his role with precision. Defensive coordinator Kane Womack highlighted Jackson's composure and consistency, traits that have been key to the Crimson Tide secondary, especially considering the inexperience of the rest of the group. The game against Georgia served as a turning point for Jackson, where he finally got his chance to shine in a high-pressure moment. The first-quarter interception was a direct result of the coaching staff's intense preparation and carefully planned defensive scheme. Womack explained how the team worked on a pressure package throughout the preseason, waiting for the right moment to use it. When that opportunity arose, Jackson executed it perfectly, demonstrating not only his physical ability but also his intelligence and discipline in following the tactical plan. Beyond the interception, Jackson's presence goes beyond statistics. He has naturally assumed the role of leader in the cornerback room, a young and inexperienced group that is learning quickly under his tutelage. Despite being known for his more reserved style, Jackson has shown that his leadership comes not only through words, but also through actions. Defensive back Kean Sabb highlighted how Jackson has led the young players in the secondary, raising the level of everyone around him. That kind of leadership is vital for a team looking to maintain its high standard, even in the midst of transitions and challenges. With 10 tackles, 2 passes defended and an interception so far this season, Domani Jackson has proven to be the answer Alabama needed to one of its biggest defensive questions. More than that, he has become a pillar of Kane Womack's defense, someone other players and coaches can rely on to maintain consistency and raise the standard of the unit. Safety Malachi Moore echoed that sentiment, noting how Jackson has adapted to the program's standard of excellence since arriving. Seeing Jackson catch his first interception in an Alabama uniform was a significant moment, not just for him, but for the entire defense. As the season progresses, Domani Jackson's consistency will be key to the Crimson Tide's continued dominance over their opponents. His combination of leadership, technical ability, and on-field intelligence makes him an indispensable piece of Alabama's defense, and if he continues this momentum, he will be a force to be reckoned with, not just in the SEC, but throughout college football. Alabama football finds itself at a pivotal point this season. Amid the relentless search for offensive consistency, two potential stars have emerged who could redefine the team's direction: running backs Justice Haynes and Jam Miller. As the games progress, it becomes increasingly clear that increasing the participation of this duo could be the catalyst the Crimson Tide needs to unleash their full offensive power. In the recent win over Georgia, despite the positive result, one thing stood out. In a matchup where controlling time of possession and managing the clock were key, Haynes and Miller had just 11 combined touches of the ball. For players with the ability to change the game, this statistic is intriguing, to say the least. Their absence in key moments raises questions about the offensive strategy and how it may be limiting Alabama's true potential. Jalen Milroe has undoubtedly been a dynamic force on offense. His ability to run the ball adds an extra dimension to the game plan. However, relying too heavily on the run can overwhelm the offense and make it predictable. Integrating Haynes and Miller more consistently would not only ease the pressure on Milroe, but it would also add layers of unpredictability that could unsettle opposing defenses. Looking at the offensive line, there are promising signs. Since the USF matchup, there have been notable improvements in pass protection, indicating that the line is ready to open up spaces for the running backs to shine. However, it is concerning to note that only once this season has a running back had more than 10 touches in a game. With significant challenges looming, such as games in Knoxville, Baton Rouge and Norman, it is essential that Alabama's offense be more balanced and versatile. Take Washington last season as an example. Kalen DeBoer and his coaching staff effectively balanced an explosive passing game with a solid ground game with Dylan Johnson. Even with quarterback Michael Penix Jr. being a central piece, Johnson was a significant player, rarely getting fewer than 10 touches. This balance was key to the Huskies' run to the national championship. Alabama has similar talent in Haynes and Miller and could use a similar approach to achieve success. It's not just about stats or touch numbers, it's about confidence. Just as Ryan Williams is a key piece of the wide receiver core, Justice Haynes and Jam Miller deserve the same trust and opportunities to impact the game. They've already shown flashes of brilliance and, with more time on the field, could become cornerstones of the Crimson Tide offense. With Vanderbilt on the horizon, there's a palpable sense of anticipation among fans. This game represents a perfect opportunity for Alabama to adjust its offensive strategy and incorporate Haynes and Miller more deeply into the game plan. It's not just about optimizing individual talents, but a strategic necessity to ensure the offense is performing at its best in the crunch times ahead. Alabama has always been synonymous with excellence and adaptation. Historically, when faced with challenges, the team responds by innovating and adjusting. There are still many chapters to come in the season, and there is time to make the necessary adjustments. Fully integrating Justice Haynes and Jam Miller could be the last step in transforming a good offense into a truly formidable one. At the end of the day, college football is about evolution and responding to challenges. The Crimson Tide have a golden opportunity to redefine their offense and reaffirm themselves as a dominant force. It is now up to the coaching staff to recognize this potential and act accordingly. The next few games will tell a lot about the fate of this season, and all eyes will be on how Alabama utilizes its emerging talent. Let me hear your thoughts now.